I never heard a crack. Just a dull impact, the slap of my shoulder hitting the cold tile, followed by my own voice murmuring a surprised, almost curious, "Oh." The pain in my hip arrived instantly sharp, spreading, definite. I tried to push myself upright, but my legs refused to cooperate. My left foot didn't even twitch. The light above me buzzed faintly. Through the frosted bathroom window, the sky outside was still ink dark. I reached toward the sink for leverage, but it might as well have been in another room. My arm slid out from under me, and my cheek hit the floor. Cold, damp. The toilet sputtered behind me, the tank running on and on. My phone lay on the counter useless, unless I could get to it. So I started moving, turning my body sideways, dragging myself inch by inch. One pull, then another. The edge of the bath mat snagged against my arm, slowing me down. My own breathing sounded too loud in the small room. Once I reached the hallway, I clawed my way toward the little table by the stairs. The old landline sat there. I hadn't touched it in months, but it still worked. I dialed Weston first. Nothing. Then Brenna. Voicemail immediately. Then Evan just 10 minutes away, always telling me, "Whatever you need, Mom." The phone rang and rang. My whole body shook from the effort. I tried to swallow the rising tears. They would only make it harder to breathe. My teeth chattered. The floor felt like winter. I lay there staring at the wooden table legs. The dust gathered beneath the radiator. A tiny line of ants, moving with quiet determination. Finally, I dialed June. We'd barely talked about anything meaningful: trash pickup, fence repairs, the time she lent me sugar. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. "Hello?" It's Lenora," I whispered. "I fell. I can't stand up. Where are you?" Her voice sharpened instantly. "Are your kids there?" "No. I'm coming." She arrived 6 minutes later, hair half-pinned, jacket thrown over pajamas. I heard her voice before I saw her. She stepped over my spilled purse, knelt beside me, and placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "You're freezing," she murmured. "Don't move. I've got you." Just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. June rode with me in the ambulance, gripping my hand tighter than necessary, but I didn't mind. The paramedic asked for my emergency contact. I gave him Weston's number. He wrote it down without a word. No one called him. I didn't ask them to. At the hospital, they slid me under the X-ray machine and confirmed what my body already knew: a fracture high on the left hip. Not severe enough for surgery, but serious enough to rearrange the next few months of my life. Bed rest. Physical therapy. Slow, deliberate movements. In the small recovery cubicle, a nurse adjusted my blanket. "Is your family on their way?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, just me." "Should I call someone for you?" "I already tried." She nodded with a polite sympathy. I wasn't sure she fully understood. The next morning, my phone buzzed once. "A message from Weston. Heard you fell. Tell me when you're home?" No question mark, no call. I stared at the screen before turning it face down. Evan never replied at all. I didn't bother checking for Brenna. June showed up after lunch carrying a new robe and a small plastic bag with some of my belongings. She'd also brought a pack of almonds and a brown paper sack. "In case the hospital food is garbage," she said. I wanted to hug her, but even reaching forward felt like fire running through my hip, so I squeezed her hand instead. By the third day, a nurse wheeled me out to a van, and I was transferred to Briar Creek Rehabilitation Center, White Walls, the faint smell of lavender soap, a tiny calendar taped to the whiteboard. June unpacked my things in the corner while I sat quietly on the bed. No one else arrived. She set my glasses near the window, folded my cardigan over the chair. "You want me to text them?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "They'll reach out when it matters to them." She studied my face for a second, then nodded. When Weston finally did show up, he didn't bring flowers. He brought questions about money. They didn't call ahead. I was halfway through a lukewarm bowl of soup when I heard Weston's voice at the nurse's station. Moments later, he and Dana walked in like potential buyers entering an open house. Same pressed shirt, spotless shoes, that familiar impatience tightening his features. Dana gave me a thin, polite smile. "Hey, Mom." Weston didn't hug me, didn't even glance at the walker next to the bed. "You found the place?" I asked. "Yeah, we were nearby," he said. "Brenna told us where you ended up." He stood at the foot of my bed with his hands in his pockets, scanning the room as though evaluating square footage. Dana took the only chair. "No, how are you?" "No, that must have been terrifying." "Instead," Weston said, "we're thinking of moving. Bigger house, better school district. Brina mentioned you might still have some of Dad's insurance tucked away." I blinked slowly. My hip throbbed. My heart ached harder. "It'd be just a short-term loan," he added. "Help with the down payment. Nothing big." I stayed silent. Dana cleared her throat. "Only if it's doable, of course. And have you ever thought about selling this place? Keeping up a whole house at your age? Maybe a facility would be safer." She spoke softly, like someone describing a storage unit. I turned my gaze toward the window. A small brown bird pecked at the feeder outside. Its wings fluttered once, then settled. "Anyway," Weston said, already losing interest, "think about it." They left with the same brisk energy they entered, already absorbed in their next errand. I stayed behind, hands resting on the thin blanket, feeling the heaviness they didn't even bother to notice. That evening, I asked the nurse to bring me my purse, not because I wanted to give them anything, but because I knew I needed to prepare for the next time they asked. I didn't sleep that night. The hallway lights dimmed overnight, machines humming in their steady rhythm while the scent of antiseptic hung in the air. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening not to Weston's words, but to the silence where the important ones should have been. Around midnight, I pressed the call button. The night nurse, a gentle woman named Clara, came in quietly. "Could you pass me my purse?" I asked. "The brown one in the drawer." She brought it over, propped me up with a couple of pillows, and slipped out again. When the room was still, I unzipped the bag. Beneath my glasses case and a packet of tissues was the folder I hadn't opened in months. The papers felt oddly heavy as I spread them across the blanket. My will, the revocation of the power of attorney Weston, had once pressured me into signing the trust I drafted after my husband died. I had always meant to revisit it someday. I never thought I'd be doing it under harsh hospital lights with bruises forming across my skin. I read through each page slowly. My hands trembled from exhaustion, but my thoughts were steady. All 3 children were still listed as beneficiaries. Weston named executor. The house divided evenly. The savings split the same way. Written in a time when I believed that if I ever fell, they'd reach for my hand, not my bank account. The amendment form lay at the bottom of the stack. I uncapped the pen, my fingers stiff, and signed my name. The signature looked smaller than it once did, lighter, but final. When I finished, I returned the papers to the folder and reached for the bedside phone. My thumb hovered for a moment before dialing the number I'd known for years. A groggy voice answered. "This is Malcolm." "It's Lenora," I said. "I'm ready. It's time to make the changes official." He didn't ask why. He simply said, "I'll be there first thing in the morning." I hung up, folded my hands over the blanket, and let the decision settle inside me like a stone finding its place. June picked me up from rehab on a gray Tuesday. She adjusted the passenger seat, loaded my small suitcase into the back, and helped me into the car with the care of someone who had been doing it for years. We drove in near silence. Words didn't seem necessary. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was burned out, and one of the shutters dangled loose. A stack of wet mail leaned against the door. Inside, the air was stale. A few of my plants sagged toward the windows, desperate for light, but the house was still mine, still standing, still waiting. I sat in my old chair while June cracked open windows and wiped down the counters. I told her I'd be fine. She didn't argue, but she didn't rush to leave either. That evening, once she was gone, I made my slow way to the bedroom. My cane tapped rhythmically against the floor, each step deliberate, measured. In the bottom dresser drawer, wrapped in a soft handkerchief, was a worn manila envelope. The deed. My name and my husband's typed neatly across the top. We'd signed it together, him with confidence, me with a slight tremor. I set the envelope beside me on the bed and stared at it for a long time. 2 days later, I walked into Malcolm's office. I had my cane, but I didn't need anyone to hold the door for me. He offered coffee. I declined. We signed the documents quietly. The trust became final, irrevocable, airtight. "I don't want anything passing hands by accident," I said. "It won't," he assured me. When I got home, I tucked the updated trust into the manila envelope and closed the drawer gently. I had barely settled into the living room when a knock sounded at the door. Brenna stood on the porch on a bright, restless afternoon, tapping lightly as if she were checking whether I was decent instead of whether I was alive. I opened the door with my cane in hand. She flashed a wide smile, the kind that looked practiced, polished, meant for show. "I brought you something," she said, lifting a paper bag. Inside was a container of soup from a downtown deli and a folded silk scarf in pale gold. "Thought you could use a little color." I thanked her and placed the bag on the counter. We sat in the living room where sunlight sliced across the rug in soft stripes. She crossed her legs, adjusted her blouse, and glanced around my home with the subtle appraisal of someone cataloging assets. "It's good you're back on your feet," she said. "Weston mentioned you might be making some decisions." A small pause then, delicately. "Financial ones." There it was, the familiar, dull ache. Not a stabbing pain, more like the quiet settling of disappointment, inevitable and heavy. I reached for my purse on the side table. The zipper rasped under my fingers. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, each labeled with a neat handwritten name. I had rewritten them twice, before arriving at the words that felt honest, not cruel, not dramatic, just truthful. I held one out to her. Brenna blinked, confused. "What's this?" "Something I wrote," I said. From the day I waited for someone to answer the phone. A faint flush rose in her cheeks. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She slipped the envelope into her bag with a quick, embarrassed motion. "Well," she murmured, standing abruptly. "I'll read it later." I nodded and walked her to the door, watching as she hurried to her car like she was escaping thick air. June stopped by that Thursday with 2 paper grocery bags and a small bouquet of daisies she claimed were on sale. She moved around my kitchen like she'd been doing it for years, putting items away, checking dates, rinsing lettuce without needing instruction. "You know," she said, pulling a jar of preserves from the bottom of the bag, "you've gotten more kindness from me in 2 weeks than you have from your own family in 2 years." I let out a soft laugh, not bitter, just worn. "You're not wrong," I said. She looked at me then, one eyebrow lifting slightly, as if there was a question she wanted to ask but didn't know how. I saved her the trouble. "I put the house in a trust," I said quietly. "The accounts, too. Everything's protected now. It isn't much, but it's mine, and they can't touch it." June dried her hands with a dish towel and leaned against the counter. "So," she said carefully, "who gets it when the time comes?" I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes weren't full of pity or expectation, just steady concern. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. "Someone who answered the phone," I said. She didn't reply immediately. She simply gave a small, understanding nod and returned to sorting cans. That evening, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table with Malcolm's beneficiary form, the one he'd given me weeks ago. It had stayed blank too long. I filled it in slowly. June's name, her address, her phone number. I paused before signing it long enough to feel the full weight of what I was doing, but not long enough for doubt to slip in. Then I signed, folded it, sealed it, left it by the door to mail in the morning. That night, the house felt different. Still mine, but no longer waiting for footsteps that would never come. Just as I finished washing my cup, headlights cut through the curtains, bright, lingering. Then the engine shut off. Another visitor. They didn't knock. They used the old spare key I never replaced. Weston's voice drifted from the hallway as if he still lived here. "Mom?" I met them in the living room. Brenna wore that polished, careful smile again. Weston stood behind her with the posture of a man dragged somewhere against his will. Evan sat in the car outside, engine running, not even pretending to come in. "We've been thinking," Brina began, smoothing the sleeve of her blouse, "about your safety, about what's best long-term." "It's probably time," Weston cut in, "to talk about assisted living." I didn't interrupt, just gestured toward the chairs they never used. "You know it's a lot to manage alone," Brenna continued. "And this house, it's big. Too big. Wouldn't it be a relief not to worry about it anymore?" I reached for the envelopes on the coffee table and handed one to each of them. Weston opened his jaw tightened as he read the top line. "You changed everything without telling us?" I held his gaze, steady. "You made your choice Tuesday morning," I said calmly. "I made mine the next day." "You're punishing us," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm protecting what remains." Brenna stared at her shoes, blinking too fast. "This is your legacy," she whispered. "You're throwing it away." "No, I'm leaving it to someone who showed up." Neither of them had anything more to say. They walked out without touching the tea I'd prepared. The door clicked shut behind them, a final, almost gentle sound. Evan's car rolled away without even a glance toward the house. I stood there a long time, hands resting on the back of the chair, letting the quiet fill the space they'd left behind. The next morning, I gathered the last of their forgotten things from the upstairs closet: an old sweater Evan once left behind, a scarf Brenna had gifted me 2 Christmases ago, a book Weston borrowed and never returned. I packed it all into a small box and set it by the door. Weeks drifted by after that. The air in the house shifted, not dramatically, but subtly, the way a room settles once it finally belongs to itself. No more knocks. No folded notes slipped under the door. No blinking messages on the machine. No belated apologies. No questions. Nothing. And yet the silence didn't ache. It simply confirmed what I already knew. They weren't coming. June visited twice a week. She brought an aloe plant to replace the wilted one by the window, straightened the crooked lampshade on my reading light, and delivered stamps without being asked. She never overstayed, never hovered. "You've got your rhythm now," she said once, watching me move around the kitchen without the cane. "You're doing well." I smiled. I was. One quiet afternoon, I opened the hallway drawer where I kept my purse, the same purse I clutched in the rehab center, the one that once held grocery lists, old receipts, and expectations I didn't realize I was still carrying. Inside lay the envelope of original letters, edges softened from being handled and unfolded too many times. That day, I added 3 more letters. No names, no stamps, no anger, just the still unspoken goodbyes that didn't need to be sent to be true. I tucked them beneath the others, closed the purse, and placed it back in the drawer. The house felt strangely alive for a moment, as though it exhaled with me. Sunlight stretched across the wooden floorboards. The kettle began to hum softly on the stove. And outside, at the feeder I had filled that morning, a handful of small birds fluttered in and settled unbothered, unhurried, simply present, just like me. The moment her engine faded, I went back to my chair. 2 envelopes remained. I mailed Weston's and Evan's letters the next morning. Brenna had already received hers. I stood at the mailbox for a long moment after dropping them inside, my hand resting on the metal door. I hadn't written them out of revenge, not exactly. More to finally say the things left unsaid when it mattered. Weston's letter was the longest. I described every call I made from the cold floor, every unanswered ring. I reminded him how I once sat with him in the bathroom for an hour after he scraped his knee. I ended with, "You were unreachable. So is my inheritance." Brenna's letter was softer, but heavier. I told her how proud I once was of her kindness, how she used to defend a friend who couldn't speak for herself, how she gave away her lunch to a girl who had none. I wrote, "I raised you to value people over things. You chose differently." Evan's letter was the shortest. "I called you from the floor. You were asleep. I was awake in pain. There was nothing else to add. Days passed, no messages. No footsteps on the porch, no calls. Not even a birthday reminder or a polite follow-up. But the silence didn't sting. Not anymore. It simply confirmed what I had come to understand. Nothing was coming. I made tea in the mornings, let the radio hum softly, watered the plants that survived, and wrote a grocery list for next week June would drive me. Then I sat down with the final envelope. The one addressed to no one but myself.